One of the most important aspects of managing blood sugars and diabetes is consuming consistent carbohydrates. That means the individual should consume the same number of carbs at each meal and a smaller amount at the snack. A typical person with diabetes will consume 45 to 75 grams of carbohydrate per meal, depending upon the calories they need. Since that is a fairly large number to add up and keep track of, we often teach clients a shortcut where they count carbohydrate servings instead. A typical person would only have to count 3 to 5 carbohydrate servings in a meal instead of 45 to 75 grams. The purpose of this video is to explain how we count carbohydrate servings. We start with the food groups. My plate is a great visual of the 5 food groups and is used for healthy populations in the U.S. It is also a good tool for those with diabetes. The one difference between the food groups for diabetes and the food groups for healthy population is the serving sizes. With diabetes, the serving size for each of the foods within a food group are adjusted to make the carbohydrates the same within that food group. We know with diabetes that carbohydrate consistency is very important for blood sugar control, so it makes sense that serving sizes would be based on carbohydrate amount. As I mentioned, within each of the food groups, the serving sizes are adjusted to make the carbohydrate amount the same. Let's start with the fruit group. Each of the serving sizes are adjusted to make each fruit serving equal to 15 grams of carbohydrate. That way, I know as long as I eat the right serving size, I will be eating 15 grams of carbohydrate for every fruit serving. The same is true for grains, which we usually refer to as the starch group in diabetes because it also includes the starchy vegetables like potatoes, peas, and corn. In the starch group, all of the serving sizes are adjusted to equal 15 grams of carbohydrate. The dairy group has a slight difference. This group is adjusted to 12 grams of carbohydrate for one serving. They chose to do this so they could keep the serving size 1 cup. It wouldn't make a lot of sense for the serving size to be 1 1/4 cups of milk. Note that this group only includes milk and yogurt. Cheeses are included in the protein group. Now let's jump over to the vegetable group. These are non-starchy vegetables such as spinach, cauliflower, carrots, broccoli, etc. These are very low carbohydrate foods with only 5 grams per serving. The protein group has 0 grams of carbohydrate, and the fats, which are not represented on my plate, are also 0 grams of carbohydrate. That means fat and protein do not count toward carbohydrate intake. I mentioned at the beginning that we are trying to develop a shortcut by counting carb servings instead of grams of carbohydrate, yet I gave you the grams of carbohydrate in a serving. So the question is, how many grams of carbohydrate make up one carbohydrate serving? The answer is 15 grams of carbohydrate is one carbohydrate serving. Knowing that one carbohydrate serving is equal to 15 grams of carbohydrate makes it easy to calculate the carbohydrate servings. Which food groups contain the carbohydrate foods that make up a carbohydrate serving? Fruits, dairy, grains. One serving from foods in each of these food groups provides about 15 grams carbohydrate, which is one carbohydrate serving. That's pretty easy conversion. We can really say that one serving of fruit, starch, and dairy is one carbohydrate serving. We don't do fractions or portions of carbohydrate servings. We round to the nearest whole. So one serving of non-starchy vegetable with 5 grams of carbohydrate would round to 0. It would take 3 servings of non-starchy vegetables to make one carbohydrate serving. Protein and fat foods would not add up to any carbohydrate servings because they provide 0 grams. Now let's see how this works when we are calculating carb servings in a food or meal. If we have a nutrition facts label for a food, we can use this to determine grams of carbohydrate and then calculate the number of carbohydrate servings. This is explained in the learning modules. We prefer to use nutrition labels, but if we do not have a label to determine carbohydrate servings, then we have to use another method to calculate it. This may seem very complicated, but it is just a step-by-step way to calculate carbohydrate servings when we don't have a food label. Once you have done this several times, it becomes very easy. Eventually, you will skip most of the steps. But for this case study project, I want you to identify all steps to ensure you know how to do it correctly. So the first step to calculating carb servings is to identify the food group. For instance, if we were trying to determine the carb servings for 1 1/4 cup strawberries, we would first identify the food group. That's easy. Strawberry is a fruit. Next, we have to check the serving size of the food. We do that by using a diabetic exchange list, which is just a list of the serving sizes by food groups for diabetes. I provide an exchange list for you to use in the project. So with exchange list, we are able to look up the serving size and determine how many servings of the food group this food represents. So if we look at the exchange list, we scroll down to the fruit group. So here's our fruit group, and we are going to scroll to strawberries. So we said we are identifying the serving size of the food, which is 1 1/4 cup strawberries. I mentioned that we were looking up 1 1/4 cup of strawberries. So we would say that we would be consuming 1 serving of fruit. From the number of food groups, we can determine the grams of carbohydrate and the number of carbohydrate servings. So if we are consuming 1 1/4 cup strawberries, that is equivalent to 1 fruit serving. The fruit servings, we recall from the My Plate, shows that a serving of fruit has 15 grams, which is equivalent to 1 carbohydrate serving. So let's do an example of one meal. We'll start with the 3 ounces of chicken breast. So the first step, if you recall, was to figure out the food group. And each of the headings here represent the 4 steps to determine carbohydrate servings. So chicken breast, we know, is a protein source. So we go to our exchange list, and we go to the meat group. And meat starts here at the bottom, meat and meat substitute list. It's divided into very lean, medium fat, and high fat meat sources. So we're looking at chicken. Chicken is a very lean source. The serving size for chicken is 1 ounce. So we said that we were consuming 3 ounces of chicken breast. So that means that we consumed 3 servings of protein. Now, how many grams of carbohydrate? Well, we know that the protein group has 0 grams of carbohydrate. Therefore, our chicken breast, 3 servings, 3 times 0 is still 0, which is 0 carbohydrate servings. So let's now go to the 1/2 cup of corn. Corn, the first thing we need to identify is what food group it falls into. Well, this is one of those starchy vegetables, so it would be considered a starch group. So we go to the exchange list to determine the number of servings. So this is the vegetable group. Let's move up to the starchy vegetables. Starchy vegetables, look at that top of the list, corn. So corn is 1/2 cup. We consumed 1/2 cup of corn, so therefore that means we consumed 1 serving of starch. How many grams of carbohydrate? Well, we go back. The starchy vegetables were in the grain group, so that would be 15 grams of carbohydrate, which is equivalent to 1 serving of carbohydrate, 1 carb serving. Now we go to the carrot sticks. First things first, we identify the food group, which is vegetable. We go to the exchange list. We scroll down to the vegetables. Here's our vegetable list. It gives a list of the vegetables and says 1/2 cup of cooked vegetable or vegetable juice or 1 cup of raw vegetables. Well, we consumed 1 cup of raw carrot sticks. So here are the carrots. That means it falls into the vegetable list. And we consumed 1 cup of raw vegetables. That means we consumed 1 vegetable serving. So now we look at the grams of carbohydrate. That goes back to our My Plate once again. And the vegetable group, every serving has 5 grams of carbohydrate. So we know that 1 cup of carrot sticks, which is equivalent to 1 serving of vegetable, has 5 grams of carbohydrate, which rounds to 0 carbohydrate servings. The next food is a tablespoon of ranch dressing. Our food group, it's a fat. So let's go to the exchange list. We scroll to fat. And here's our fat list. And we're going to look for salad dressing, regular, 1 tablespoon. So we have 1 tablespoon of salad dressing. We consumed 1 tablespoon of ranch dressing. That means we had 1 serving of fat. Going back to the My Plate, our version to show how many grams of fat. Remember, fat was not represented on the My Plate, but we said that it was 0 grams of carbohydrate. So 0 grams of carbohydrate is equal to 0 carbohydrate servings. Our last one that we want to look at is 1 cup of apple juice. Well, apple juice is a fruit, at least as long as it's 100% real juice. We go back to the exchange list, to the fruit group, and we look under juices here, title, and we see apple juice at the top of the list under fruit juices, and it says 1/2 cup is a serving of fruit juice, a serving of fruit. So we consumed 1 cup apple juice. That means we consumed 2 servings of fruit. Well, we know that 1 serving of fruit equals 15 grams of carbohydrate. So if we consume 2 servings of fruit, that means we had 30 grams of carbohydrate or 2 carbohydrate servings. So hopefully this helped provide some guidance in how to do your carb counting.